Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Alston, and I am your host here for the second episode of the Tim Alston Show. Here, our aim is to educate, equip, and empower emerging leaders with God thought leadership so that they can make positive changes, both for today and for their communities and beyond. Today is Monday, January 27th, 2025, and there's a new citizen sheriff in town. And if he has any real wisdom, he will turn to the 23rd Psalm in the Bible. Let me explain. Pete Hegseth, on Friday, the 24th of January, Pete Hegseth was confirmed by the full Senate as the next Secretary of Defense. Now, the vote was very close. It was a 51 to 50 vote. In fact, Vice President J.D. Vance had to cast the tie-breaking vote in order for Trump's nominee to go through because three Republican senators chose to oppose that nomination. And for some understandable reasons. But now, who is Pete Hegseth? First of all, Pete Hegseth, many people know him as they know him first of all as the host of of Fox TV. He was a host and a commentator on Fox TV. Then he served as an author. He authored a couple of books, and he was also the U.S. Army veteran. However, what concerned many people is the fact that they felt that he lacked the experience to head up the Department of Defense. He had never managed anything on the scale of the Department of Defense, and understandably so. I mean, the Department of Defense, the U.S. Department of Defense, first of all, is the largest employer in the United States. It employs some 3.3 million personnel. To put that in a comparative sense, that would be like Pete Hegseth being the governor of either Mississippi or the governor of Arkansas, as their populations are approximately that size. Additionally, the Department of Defense is large. It is the world's largest military operation, and it has a budget, an annual budget of $850 billion. The additional complications that came with the Hegseth nomination was that there were allegations about sexual abuse, domestic abuse, drinking on the job, and just some general misconduct overall. Now, when those objections were raised and when those objections were handled, and in a recent New York Times interview with Susan Wiles, and Susan Wiles is Donald Trump's new chief of staff, when she was interviewed and asked about these allegations, she simply said, "That's what staff is for. That's what staff is for. It is our obligation," she continued, "to give him the people that understand the business of national defense." What she said was really, really key. It may have offended some people, but she spoke a truth that I'm going to later unpack for you. She said, "That's what staff is for. It is our obligation to give him people that understand the business of national defense." What does she really mean by that? What was she trying to tell us? What was she trying to share with us in terms of the Pete Hegseth nomination? She was absolutely correct. If Pete Hegseth, despite his apparent lack of experience, if he is to succeed in this role, it will be because of the staff of experts that surround him. And this underscores a larger point. Leadership and followership must work hand in hand. Leadership and followership must work hand in hand. And that's what's going to be the key for Pete Hegseth and anybody else in a leadership position. What we must understand is that this issue is larger than Pete Hegseth himself. It is a larger issue that deals with the very issue of leadership and followership. As a matter of fact, Nicole Russell, who is an opinion columnist in USA Today, said in her column this morning, she said, if Pete Hegseth can ensure our nation's enemies that they understand the losing stake of confronting the U.S. military, he might just succeed at keeping us all safe. For our sake, let's hope and pray that he can rise to the occasion. That's the nature of that particular job, and any kind of a job. But it's really heavy on him because of what he is trying to do. As I said, the issue really transcends Pete Hegseth because of the fact that it deals with the larger issue of what makes a leader successful. Indeed, the success of any leader, Pete Hegseth or any other leader, ultimately depends on the emerging leaders who work behind the scenes and make the trains run on time. And that's absolutely key. Because an organization, what many folks may not realize, but those of us who have worked in the trenches as secondary leaders, we understand the nature of an organization. And perhaps one of the best analogies that we can make about that organization is the fact that organizations, by and large, are very much like, well, they're very much like icebergs. They're like icebergs. With an iceberg, for example, the visible 10% that is above the surface, that is visible to all, that represents the leaders who are on top. That's the iceberg. However, you and I know that the real power and strength and stability of an iceberg is that 90% that is submerged below the surface. And one of the most painful examples that is very famous to us is the example of the Titanic back in the early 20th century. It was built to be the ship of all ships. It was supposed to be unsinkable. And Captain John Edward Smith basically made that prediction. On its first and sadly its only cruise across the Atlantic Ocean, the problem occurred that he saw the iceberg, or let me be correct, he saw the tip of the iceberg and misjudged it for being the iceberg itself and tried to steer around it. But the bottom of the ship did not encounter the top of the iceberg, which was the objective for Captain Smith to get around the top of the iceberg. The bottom of the ship hit and was damaged severely and fatally by that which lay below the surface. And that became a lesson to all of us. Matter of fact, it was even popularized in a movie several years ago. Remember the Titanic itself, because the real power of the iceberg and the real power of any organization is what lies beneath the surface. In most organizations, no, in all organizations, it is what lies below the surface that matters. It is in any family, any church, any social club, any corporation. That's where the power is. As a matter of fact, someone once asked Chanakya, who was an ancient Hindu philosopher and statesman, they said, who is more powerful, a kingmaker or a king? Kingmaker or a king? Chanakya answered, anyone can become a king, but a king's reign is temporary. A kingmaker, however, can make many kings. That's a powerful statement, and one that should not be taken lightly. Anyone can become a king, but a king's reign is only temporary. The kingmakers, those who are below the surface, they're the ones that create the kings. They make the kings and the top leaders what they are. And the sooner that we understand that, the better off it is. And that's what's going to be the key for Pete Hegseth. Well, it's already becoming the key, according to that New York Times article about Susan Wiles, his chief of staff. She is his closest aide. She is also the one who, during that 76-day transition period, it is said that she was the first one who would see him in the morning and the last one who would see him at night in the office. She was a veteran strategist. She was a veteran lobbyist. She had worked in campaigns. In fact, she had worked with and been a part of the inner circle of Donald Trump's team for 8 years prior to her running the campaign, his presidential campaign, a successful campaign in 2024. The point that I'm making about Hegseth and about Chanakya and about the iceberg is that emerging leaders are kingmakers. They're the ones who make the kings. They are the ones who empower the decision makers and ensure an organization's long-term success. The ones who are below the surface, the ones who are not getting the acclaim, the ones who are not that 10% above, visible in the public eye, they're the ones who, by and large, run the organizations. And we can see that across the board. And we would be helpful, and we would be very much helped if we understood that. Let me take an example, a famous example out of the National Football League. Many of you may remember, if you're my age, and if you're a sports fan, if you're as old as I am, you remember that one of the most famous players in the NFL in the 1970s was a guy named O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson was the star running back for the Buffalo Bills. And in 1973, O.J. Simpson made the record books as becoming the first player to ever rush for that milestone of 2,000 yards. He ran actually for 2,003 yards. But now he did not do it on his own. He didn't do it on his own. In front of him was an offensive line of 6 men, the linemen. And because of their prowess in making OJ what he was, OJ then nicknamed them the Electric Company. As you may or may not remember, O.J. Simpson was nicknamed the Juice, OJ. And so therefore, what he nicknamed that offensive line of those 6 men, he called them the Electric Company. And they were the ones who created the path to allow him to succeed. And in fact, of those, 3 of those guys made the All-Pros and the Pro Bowl, and 2 of them, Reggie McKenzie and Dave DeLamielleure, also made it into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Why? Because of the job they did behind the scene. In fact, their job was so prominent. They were so prominently behind the scene. They were so prominently behind the scene of O.J. Simpson's record-breaking, milestone-setting success for those 2,003 yards that U.S. Army back in the I think it was the 1980s, maybe in the 70s, did a commercial about him. I might be able to pull it up. I'm not sure. They did about a 29, 30-second commercial about the Electric Company, about being the best you can be, because they became a prime example of those who were in number 2 positions, helping to create the number 1 person. The reminder here is the fact that the strength of any leader depends on the unseen efforts of the team. The strength of any leader, as I'm talking now in this series to emerging leaders, is very key to understand that the strength of any top leader is that of the unseen, depends on the unseen efforts of their teams. Let me go to the Bible here. And I go to the Bible for several reasons. Number 1, in terms of a business model, the Bible stands as history's all-time best-selling book for humankind. Researchers tell us, for example, that the Bible has sold over anywhere between 4 to 6 billion copies in its lifetime since it was first established. I remember reading one statistic that said that in the United States alone, every 1.7 seconds, or roughly every 2 seconds, a Bible is sold, given away, or donated. That's a lot of Bibles. So I use the Bible as a reference because, and I'll share with you in a future episode, of what Oprah Winfrey said back in 1979 that really crystallized the power of the Bible in her mind and then ultimately in my own mind. But let's take the Bible, for example, once again. Here we see an example of emerging. The Bible is filled with examples of emerging leaders that led to successes. The most primary one in my mind is that of Jesus Christ. Jesus was part of the Holy Trinity in heaven. According to the Bible narrative, Jesus was a part of that Holy Trinity in heaven. There's God the Father, there's God the Holy Spirit, and God the Son, who was Jesus. But in their plan of salvation, they said, if and when mankind should sin, if and when the first inhabitants, the first parents, Adam and Eve, sinned, God had already put in place a plan of salvation. And that plan of salvation included Jesus volunteering to come to earth. He was fully divine, but he came to earth to become fully human in order to save mankind and to die on the cross. In so many words, there can be no us without Jesus being number one and being number two as an emerging leader. And so that example of Jesus sticks out. And there are other examples that you can do, that you will be able to see as you go through the Bible, of emerging leaders who make things happen. And we're proud of that. We're pleased. Hey, that's how we exist. What I love the text in the Bible, it talks about Jesus being the good shepherd. And it's epitomized in the 23rd Psalm, where it says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. But it makes a statement in verse 4. It says, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. In that text, the rod stands for protection and the staff stands for guidance. Those are two qualities that emerging leaders must have and must provide in order to assure success. The rod for connection and the staff for correction. The two of them work together. And so when I look at leaders in an organization, the top leader basically is the rod. He or she is there to protect the employees, protect them with salaries and benefits, with a safe workplace, with vacations, and also with the opportunity to advance in the organization. And the staff here is that which provides that guidance, those folk that help to make the train run. And we are pleased about that, the rod and the staff. It is our hope that, once again, that with his lack of experience, if Pete Hegseth is going to succeed, or any leader is going to succeed, they will need their rod and their staff, those emerging leaders, those secondary leaders who are characterized, because let's face it, the top leaders in many instances, they come and go. But it's those secondary leaders, those emerging leaders, people like you and me, who are number one and our number two positions. We're the ones that are there because of longevity. We're the tenured people. We know where the bodies are. We have come through the ranks, and we're the ones who save and secure our various organizations. So it's very, very important for us as we look at Pete Hegseth. And understand me right now, I'm not asking you to agree or disagree with the choice of Pete Hegseth, nor are you asking me to agree or disagree with that choice. What I do in this series is look for current events and newsmakers and to show them and present them in the light of biblical best practices. And so with the choice of Pete Hegseth, it allowed me, particularly with what Susan Wiles said, that is what staff is for. Our obligation is to put a team around him that know the business of national defense. What she spoke there spoke volumes and is absolutely true. It is important that staffs and that leaders understand the importance of staff, because staffs, once again, make the trains run. This is my part one on Pete Hegseth. I want to talk about another side of him the next time, and I hope you'll be with us. And so thank you for coming and spending some time with me and with us today. I hope that you've enjoyed, hope that you've learned, I hope that you've grown. And don't just keep this information to yourself. I'd like for you to like it, to share it, with others, and also hit that subscribe button to subscribe to it as well. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for enjoying us on this Monday, January 27th, 2025. And remember, if this information is becoming to you, then you should be coming to us. Thank you, take care, and God bless.